Right, so welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Hubs creators. So we're here to share knowledge around Hubs, Spoke, and Blender, and help the community create better Hubs experiences. Really excited to have Fabien here to help us kick off the first meeting. Fabien is a pillar of the Hubs community, I would say, and a dynamic coder and technologist. And he does so many interesting and thought-provoking works that I can't keep up with everything he's doing. So let's welcome Fabien and his talk, Extending Hubs with Code from the Console to the Custom Client.
Thanks a lot, man, for the introduction. Just a first little tech check. Can you hear me all right? Or is the sound, the voice clear? Is it fine enough? If you can't hear me, you can either get closer or using options, let's say tab or space, and pointing at my face, you can use the little plus button for volume over my head. This way we don't have to respect social distancing, but if we don't want to get right on top of each other, I recommend using the little plus arrows on top of the head of someone, of the speaker. Okay, so I will actually not give a talk as much as a little demonstration. I'll explain a little bit like some of the stuff I did, and also I think because it's more of a meetup, open up for discussions or questions on whatever I've done that people would be interested in, or that is not clear how I've done something, or even suggestion or ideas. I want to keep this as I'm happy to explain whatever I've done. I don't know if I can explain it clearly, but I'll be happy to try. So I'll do a little demonstration at first on something that I think is one of the most interesting avenue at the moment, and to make it I think it's fine. I think that was the model initially to make it more of a presentation with a speaker, so you can just listen, no problem. But like I said, I'll try to make it a bit more shared as a community thing. So I'll put my screen there, and I'll make it a bit bigger, because I will put my my console on it. So because this is where I do most of the tinkering around, let's say. Yes, I do some of it on the custom Hubs client, but most of the time I spend in the console. So for example, one of the thing I've set up here was those tiles, let's say, on top of the roof, or those windows. And what some of you might not know is that of course you can move them using your either your hands, or using when you're in VR, or using the mouse on desktop. But what's more interesting, if you want to make something more surprising, is to use code. So I've done a little example there. So I'll remove the animations, and I guess I'll zoom a lot more on the code. So let me make it much bigger. Is it readable now, the code, or is it still too small?
I think it's still a bit small, to be honest. Oh,
it's still a bit
maybe
small?
It's me.
Well, that's the biggest I can do. So if it's too small, if you do a right click.
I think if you click in the top. Yeah.
That's the biggest. I could try to reduce my screen resolution, but that's going to be tricky. So the main idea here, I can bring the screen a bit closer to you. The main idea is, if you're not familiar with Hubs and AFrame, is that Hubs relies on AFrame. So I can basically, instead of moving using the mouse one of those boxes, I can select them. And for example, if I execute this, yeah, F and zoom in full screen. So if because those entities, those 3D objects in hubs are part of the DOM, then I can query them and I can take all the GLTF, so those are models from, yeah, you can list assets like this, sorry, in the right corner, so I'll have all my Google Poly that are there. But if I use the console and some JavaScript, then I can query, for example, all the GLTF objects, so all the 3D model imported. And I can add also the network property so that I'm sure that they are all shared together. And here, for example, have the list with the properties, so they're not very useful, but you can see that each entity there has its ID. So that we make sure that we have all the same, let's say, properties of those entities. So that means, for example, this tile right there, I'll just move it a bit closer, has a certain dimension, so the scale, the certain position, where it is in space, and a certain rotation. It has other attributes, but by default in hubs, the properties that are network will be the position, scale, and rotation. So that's how we can see that those tiles are where they are. So I can query them all, and then I can apply some changes to it. So I'll do a little example. So you need to, well, I'll just execute it. And if you look up now, all the tiles are nicely adjusted, let's say. So some of you, I guess, those who are more familiar with Blender are going to ask, like, what's the point of this? Why not do everything in Blender? Which again, by the way, you can appreciate the room itself was done by yours truly. So I'm pretty proud of it. It's pretty basic if you know anything about Blender, but I've done it myself. Of course, thanks to the tutorial to Jim and Dom on YouTube. But what is interesting for it, don't look too much, it's actually pretty basic, but it's mine. What I find interesting is because it's mine, I can customize it and I can make it more interactive and more animation. So why I'm saying all this is, if I did all this in Blender, let's say the room and the tiles, maybe they would be better aligned or more integrated or something like this, but then I couldn't move them. It would be done together as one 3D object. So by having the room done in Blender and the tiles also in Blender but as separate objects, then I can control them at run or even networks. So meaning I can animate, let's say, those. So I had also a little example on this. Because Hubs includes AFrame and AFrame includes Anime.js. You can, for example, select one of those tiles and apply, add an animation to it, and then run the animation. Hopla. So that was a bit short, but hopefully you saw that this tile just went from being flat on the top of the house, let's say, to quickly going up. So I can restart the animation. The whole point is that this is done all together in the shared space. If you were to do it without using networked AFrame and without using those shared property, only you would see it locally. Whereas there, so as you can see from the URL on top, we're on the hubs mozilla.com, so it's not a custom client. You did not go on my own server, you went on the normal Mozilla server, and yet I hope you are seeing things, so animation and layout of content put dynamically that you haven't seen, let's say, normally in a usual hub scene. But the goal there is just to show, rather than using the console, you can start already to extend hubs, to do layout, to do animations, to even do, for example, you can, instead of playing with 3D meshes, you can play with people. So I can look up also the position of people and then compare So first, does it make sense, the difference between building the scene in Blender, and adding 3D object to animate them? Is it clear? Yeah. You can also you can ask questions directly, so it's a bit more dynamic. Is there anything that I can clarify already on this example?
I was wondering what are all the things you can manipulate? You can manipulate, I think, the objects, as I understand, also positions of people or yourself, or
yeah. So I'll clarify a bit. So you can manipulate 3D objects, so those assets there, and 3D object can be video also. And you can manipulate what you can own, let's say. So for example, to clarify on this function here, it's using a util function on networked AFrame. So NAF is for networked AFrame. And I get the networked entity. Because if I do, for example, if I skip this step, if I just take, for example, I'll take the first plank. So normally I have this plank. I'll, for example, make it smaller. And now, yeah, you see this tile there is much smaller. But do you, so don't just look on my screen, but look also there on the right. You see the very first tile. Is it smaller for you too?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, can somebody grab it and move it around? Just move it a bit up or down, wherever you want. Yeah, thank you. And now I'll try to change its position, but you see it doesn't change the position anymore. So here, normally, I can just prove that I can still do it. So here I change again the scale and the position, but if somebody moves it and I don't use networked AFrame to get the networked entity and say this tile is actually mine, so if I don't become the owner of this 3D object or this entity, then it might fail, and it fails silently, like you don't know, it's not your tile, quote unquote, anymore. So you can move 3D objects, you cannot move people because you cannot own them. So that was a very long way to answer your question, that you can only move or interact or dynamically change things that you can own using the networked AFrame take ownership function. And you cannot own someone else.
But you can move yourself. But you can move yourself, I guess, because you can own yourself.
Yes, you can move yourself, yeah. And actually, a little, let's say, trick or little challenge that I encounter while doing this is you can move yourself, you can move other 3D object or any, how do you say, any entity that is in the room. But there is another little challenge. Let's say if I take this tile and I toss it, hopla, here I added some physics to it. So there is a force from the physics engine that was added, and it plays the animation locally and then network the result for all of you to see. So I'll move it a bit more. I need to catch it because otherwise if it falls, then I lose it forever. So if I do this, I'll do it a bit more, and then I try to reposition it, and you can see that the tile is not back in its position. It's because in order to be able to control it, you need to make it yours, but you also need to stop the physics to apply, because otherwise I move it for like a microsecond, it appeared here, but then the physics engine keeps on applying the force, and then it looks like the modification was not applied. So in those cases, because I don't remember all this, I have my notes. So this page here, you can see some of the previous proof of concept I've done, a bit of everything. I invite you also to go check it, like right now, so that if there is something there specifically that you find interesting, I can clarify a bit how it worked. But the point here was not to show this. The point was that I have explanation and notes in there. So for example, to move a random entity, it is important to own it, but also stop potential physics movement. And then I have the code there, so that I don't have to actually remember it. And I have a search on my guest. So you see I pre-populate the search on guest with the code, and then I can see examples. So for example, I've done some little games, and then I can search for it, let's say kinematic. So I can set the kinematic, the forces applied to it, to be nothing. So I'll try it again. I put this to stop the physics, and I'll take, for example, this one. I'll try to gently toss it up like it moves. And you see now it's back in position because I stopped the physics engine before changing the position. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. A lot of the examples there, they have, and normally all of them have GIST attached to it, so that all those little GIF have some explanation. The code might not work anymore, to be honest. It is probably either not documented or not commented, and might not make sense, but at some point it exists. So the link, I'll put it back in the chat. It's here, and also I put it here on this wall of the house, basically.
What?
Yeah, that's this link. So yeah, there are a couple more examples, but I think this already, so why do I get, how do you say, excited about this kind of thing is because I think this is one of the nicest, easiest way to make a room in Hubs dynamic with the minimum amount of effort that you design the room in Blender or wherever you want, but let's say in your favorite 3D modeling software. But in several parts, meaning the room itself, and then the assets that you want to dynamically move around. Because here, for example, I did a short animation, but if you want to do an animation that lasts not just 1 second, but 5 minutes or 10 minutes, if you want to make it, I don't know, whatever animation you want to apply to it, if you want to add objects also, you can do this this way. So it means because if you do it everything in Blender, if I start Blender and do an animation, let's say I open or close the window, it's going to be static, and the animation is going to be applied as soon as the object is loaded locally, so for each client. And it means if I do a sunset or that I close those windows in Blender, it's not going to be networked, so it means they might close at a certain moment for you and at the different moment for myself. Whereas when everything is networked, it happens synchronously, and then you can do animation in your scene that everybody experiences at the very same time. So you don't have the same freedom of, let's say I cannot change, well, I can change the geometry through the scale, but I cannot deform it as, I don't know, like some kind of liquid, let's say. So you don't have exactly the same freedom as in animating a GLTF in Blender, but you still can have some dynamic objects. So I think, yeah, that's the exciting part, is you design your whole scene in Blender, but you split in different elements, the ones that are going to be static and the ones that are going to be dynamic. Make sense still?
Yeah, cool.
And then, because in the title, I mentioned that bring it in the console to the Hubs client. When you have something like this, that makes sense. So you have your code running locally, you open, let's say, a second window to make sure that, I really recommend you do this, because otherwise you're going to tinker around in Hubs. You're going to want to show a friend to show off a bit because you're proud of your result. You're going to invite them and it's not going to work. So I think it's really important that you open a second window in your browser and check that whatever tinkering you've done actually is networked. Otherwise, yeah, it's a it's a source of frustration. And once you've done it, you don't need that's something that I need to clarify. You don't need to put in your Hubs custom client. Like that's really optional, because like right now we have of course it's just an example and it's a bit silly how simplistic it is to just move those tiles on the ceiling, but you can imagine no matter how complex it is, and all this run without me touching the custom client. So for, I don't know for which events you want to build those, let's say customization, but you don't necessarily need to deal with AWS or DigitalOcean if that's not your thing. If, for example, this was a live VJing event, I invite you to the room and then you see everything change. There is no need, let's say, for a custom client. But if you still want to do this, of course, once you have this code working, you would add it on your custom client, making sure that it applies at the right moment. You don't want necessarily to start for everybody to have animation that are triggered, for example. So there is a bit of customization there that I'll show you, but I'm going to actually show. Is there any question again?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to run it in a headless mode, in a sense that if I want just to write a piece of code that will connect to a specific room at a given time and run this code?
Yeah. Yes, so there is how is it, like the Chrome headless boat. So I don't know if I have it in my history. GitHub Hubs headless. Yeah, so I'll put the link in the chat. But I think that's what I would recommend if you want headless and without customizing the client. So it's using headless Chromium, and Puppeteer behind it. And then you can have those kind of comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also have a question, or maybe an ID, but maybe you can tell me if that's then possible. Let's say I want to have host an event in Hubs, and I want to have a dynamic agenda of all the speakers and times.
Yeah.
And I put that in a Google Doc, and I include it here in the room. And I can write a script that's by pushing a button or something, it will pop up in front of me. It will reload the page, and if I hide it again, I can put it in my pocket. Let's say that's something that would be possible to animate.
So I'm not sure I got it. You want it would display the agenda.
And let's say a virtual iPad that I put in my pocket and I get out. So when I press a button, I can animate the document to come in front of me, update it with the latest information, and then I can put it away again.
So for let's say hiding or for the easy way, yes, you can put it in your pocket. And here I could apply, for example, I guess, let me try quickly. My screen is, oh, so it's vid, I forgot. But I could take this and I can scale it up and down and I can move it, yes, in the position of my pocket. Wait, do you mean also in the headset, like not on desktop?
My use case would be desktop, but
okay,
maybe
because it's easier on desktop because you can change the HUD, so you can add the button, let's say here, to hide and show. Yeah. Also, do you want it shown to everybody else or just private for yourself?
I think in this case it should be private, I would say.
Yes. That I'm asking because it means, for example, all the thing about there being networked, they don't apply anymore. What you can do is you can also create an entity, either 3D object or something empty even, add content on it. For example, I did an experiment, let me see where it is. So they're not all there. No, it's not there. So I have a little experiment where I have my webcam but in private, a copy of my webcam, and that nobody else shows it. So if you add an element in, so let me see. So monolithic, it started. Like it started half an hour ago. So if you don't hear discussion, then you have a problem. So if, for example, I think if I create my cube and I add it to the scene. It should be somewhere. So the problem is I don't know the coordinates. I don't know where. So I can look for myself at my coordinate, but that's going to be tricky. I'll just fly a bit. Excuse me for a second. I'm not going to. Okay, I'm not going to waste your time. But the idea was that. Hopla. If I create a non-networked entity, so for example here a cube, it would be visible only to myself. So that would be one way to make it private, and then I can apply those scale, position, rotation, whatever I want. And because in your specific case it would be a Google Doc, an agenda, what I would let me. That happens sometimes with hubs. That's okay. It's part of the game. So yeah, if you create an element and you don't add the networked property to it, it's going to be private by default. Yeah, so if you add it without adding the networked property on it, it's going to be private. And then you can change the scale, the position. You can add, for example, the property of being a web page like this. And the only question I would have in your specific case is how to programmatically call this refresh button, basically. Because I assume your page, your Google Agenda page would be updating with the agenda live.
Yeah.
And this refresh button, I've done it in the past, honestly, but I don't really remember. I'll just quickly check on my notes. I'll search for whatever. And then... Wait, I think I'll come back to you because I know I have three parts. No, that's not that. Ah, yeah, okay, that's a trick also you could do. I don't know if it would. So I'll show a little example. I made a utility function to load an element from a URL. So for example, I'll take this. I'll remove that. So this little function take a list of URLs and load it networked in hubs. And for example, for my work, I did some photogrammetry work, and I will take GLTF. Okay, I have this one. So load asset from URL. Up. And you can hear it, and normally here I see it loading. There is a little statue. So do you see the statue there? It's a bit big. Do you see the photogrammetric model?
Yep.
Yeah. So here I just give it a URL, so that the URL of the GLB file. And my little util function, yes, so I don't know if you have another GLB, this one will not work. Do I have? Yeah, I don't have one at hand, but I'll put the same few times. It's going to be a bit boring, but voila. So here you see couple copies of it. Yeah, maybe I'll delete them because I'm afraid in terms of proof. Is it laggy for anybody because they are relatively heavy models? No, it's fine. Okay.
Yep.
So let me try this. No. Get it this way. Copy download link. Voila. It's a bit small. What is okay? A starfish, a special kind of starfish. So yeah, that's actually one way that I like to set up dynamic rooms. Is I'm going to take a list of models, and actually just to I'll call it models, for example. And then I can take the first model, so that will be another starfish. And then I'll take, I'll change its scale to, it's pretty small, so I'm going to make a big starfish. Okay, that's a bit gigantic. Who would have guessed? Voila. Ah, but somebody, so that's good because it's an example of not having control of it. So let it go, and then I move it, so now I'm the owner of it, and I can now change the scale. Wow. But yeah, the point is, if I load my 3D models like this, my GLTF or GLB rather, then I get back all my models, and then I can apply whatever changes I need on it. So that's a very easy way to set up a dynamic content inside a room rather. So why do I say all this is I can also, I think at least I can take a URL. So for example, if I take the Puppeteer link and I load it, so links, let's say. Now I'll reposition it. So it's loading the preview from GitHub. I also actually just scaled 2 because it's a bit small. What did I do? Ah, yeah, the first one. Okay, that's again, I have some kind of size. See it a bit big. So yeah, here it loaded not just 3D models, but anything basically that the media loader component of Hubs can handle. And then what you would do is, for example, change the attribute of the source. So I'll try. Honestly, I don't remember if that works or not. So I would take the media loader, and as the source, I would put again the puppeteer one, and then I would add, let's say, a hash just to force a refresh of it, something like that. Nope, it's not dead now. What's the... Oh, I'll cheat for now because of time. And I think it's the equivalent of refresh basically. So that's how I would do it. I would load your agenda, position it, scale it, whatever, and then periodically, let's say, call the what's the name, set. Well, just periodically refresh it, force to refresh the page by loading another URL. Does it make sense?
It's clear. Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's great, actually.
I would also, just because it's Google, I would look for an alternative, but that's just my personal philosophical position, let's say.
I agree.
Okay. Did this spark any question from someone else, by the way? Still makes sense?
Great.
Just so you know, all those, the little util functions, for example, they're also present on this page. And I think I made a guest here with different other utils, like how to pin entities, because typically if you load up a scene like this, you might not want to do it every single time. You might, or you might not, it's up to you. But then if you have, that's the good thing about doing it programmatically, you can load 10 tiles or how many units, whatever. But then the problem is if you leave, like if right now I leave the room just to reconnect, everything that I've added is gone. So what I would normally do is with those util functions, just pin all of them, which is super easy. So I'll just, for example, pin the latest model that I loaded. So it's easy, but if you don't know it the first time, you're going to waste time doing it. So I don't have my model. What did I do? Pin is not defined. Is it true? Yeah. And now the model, I think it was this one. No. One of those models. I think this one. No. Where is it? So one of those models is pinned. So yeah, that's also the goal. Those functions themselves are not specifically complicated, but sometimes the syntax can be a bit surprising. And they're useful when you do this kind of dynamic layout of rooms or animations. You would usually want to not just load the assets from URLs, but also pin them. You also might want to remove them from the media list, because if you do this kind of rooms where the I'll put this back a bit closer. If you do rooms that are not just static but with some dynamic content, I'll toss that. Then you don't want to lose every time their position. So pinning them, removing from the media list, so that here you don't necessarily want, for example, your visitors to be able to see that, so you would hide them. So for example, if I take, so I will forget the syntax, but that's okay. So I take all the GLTF model, I take only the networked ones, and then I do my little utils. and that's it. I retook all the GLTF model that were there are gone. If I didn't do it wrong, it should be gone also from your list. And then again, if you add dozens of dynamic 3D objects or how do you say assets in general, you don't want it to pollute this. For user, it can be confusing. So yeah, example of little utils that are usually irrelevant, but in this specific context, in this other way to set up a room is more interesting. What I was mentioning before also about trigger is interesting. So for example, I will have another little utils to get an avatar from a name. So I'll take the shortest name, so Vincent, that's going to be you. So now I have some properties for Vincent, and I can, for example, check his position. So Vincent, if you can move a little bit, it's a little bit, I hope you, yeah, super, thank you so much. Live, live exercise. And then we can see here the properties of the position changed. So it was, yeah, I'm not going to read the number, but basically the z value changed from 1 to -1. And what's interesting, for example, is I'm going to take Dean's position because it's also short. Dean, and then because there are 3D objects from 3GS, I can again get the position. It's a 3 vector from 3GS, so I can get the distance to someone else. So for example, Vince. And I did it wrong. Ah yes, I need to get the position also from Vince. So you're 5 meters away. Can one of you or both of you move just a little bit again, please? Vince or Dean? Yeah, super, thank you. So we can see, and for example, it's a little bit silly, but just as a contextual game, you could force people to respect social distancing, or let's say if somebody gets too close to the screen, you could say a warning, you can add something blink or whatever. So that's the most basic, let's say, form of interaction that you can do, again, without much effort. Again, it's not even a custom client. All this could be applied to a custom client. But here, again, we're just in the hubs.mozilla.com server in a public room, and we can do some interaction based on the position of different people. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
And does it spark any ideas or question or something on that?
Mainly, I'm thinking especially for web, what I'm looking for is, I know that the DOM layer integration in WebXR is not here yet, but I'm looking for other ways to interact. So and I think this could actually help you to find, yeah. Let's, for example, let's say you want to give a class on something, and you don't want to, for example, placing the screen exactly on the media frame.
Yeah.
I think you can actually now make an interface that people can just put a link and you put it for them on the media frame automatically, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Well, those kind of things that yeah.
So to be honest, the media frame is really cool, and a lot of those hacks I've done before the media frame existed, because one of the biggest frustration was, especially for for people that are a bit finicky in terms of design, to have, let's say, those flat screens or projectors or whatever that are 2D, that are not perfectly aligned with the wall, is driving some people crazy. So being able to, let's say, take the video here and align it perfectly, yeah, some pain felt there. So I'll show you actually a little trick also related to not using media frame, but that could be a bit more generalist. But I've made utils from the get first element from hash, because on the media list here you have a hash on the right. So here is, for example, video. It's from video. It's the first letters or digits after the first hash or something like this. I forgot the exact heuristic, but it's something like this. So for example, no, I will take my little util function, hopla, put it there rather. I'll toss that away. So get first element from hash, and then the hash here is vid for video. So our video screen equal this. And now I can take my video screen, set the rotation, again, which is what usually drives us, at least most of us, crazy. And then I'll assume that's without any rotation, but maybe somebody moved it before, so I need to, yeah. So now this screen, and there was no media frame, is perfectly aligned, which is quite silly, but yeah, I think for a lot of us who do either care about design or a bit precise, makes a crazy difference. So you can imagine having the media frame equivalent, but rather than adjusting or having it after the fact, or that when somebody comes, let's say, next to the podium, they would be able to adjust their slide in just the right orientation. So yeah, for this kind of context, it is pretty useful. And again, you can do this with anybody in the room, or with somebody who has other properties. Let's say they are admins of the room or moderator, because you can query that also. So I forgot exactly how, to be honest, but I have it somewhere there. You have properties of the different roles in the room. You can get them using React, but it's a little bit risky because it means it has to be open. But otherwise, on the networked element, you can get the rights, and you can say only the moderators of the room, when they get next to the podium or close enough, let's say within 1 meter radius, then I adjust the screen by setting the rotation to 0 or something like this.
Yeah, cool. Or you can adjust the room, maybe if you have more people joining in, then you can enlarge the screen, or you can create more space for people. Yeah.
So one of the very last things I just showed you was this. So I did not type it, and to prove it, I'll take something that I would not be able to type. Well, okay, that would be, I could type it here, but you can see on my screen that I'm not doing it. So you have this function. I'll put it also in the chat, or I'll make it this way. So you have this function also that can send messages. So for announcement, let's say in the room, if you were to have a bot, or if you were yourself to send periodic reminders to people, like, hey, please mute yourself if you're not the speaker, this kind of things. I found this function to be pretty useful. You can just send a message and it's going to broadcast it to all participants. Yeah, I don't think it's realistic for me to go through all the different little tips and tricks, but yeah, it's all there on the Hubs notes page. So the very last thing I'll show in order to be, how do you say, truthful to the title, is bringing it to the Hubs client. So I'm thinking, what's the best or more interesting way to do it? So let's see if I can make that big enough. Yep. So I have my different prototypes, and I have some on Hubs. So basically what I would normally do, I have a few, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. So what's in the important part, let's say, would be the different command, and the most important part would be the deploy command in Hubs. So you will need to have the right tokens in order to be able to push to your Hubs instance. And once you've done that, so you will usually do a npm run deploy. I think there is a login first. So you would work on it locally. So for example, in the source, you would go, I think it's arguable, but I would say one of the cleanest way. So the goal, when I say cleanest, is the modifying your Hub client so that it doesn't break the next time there is an update. So if you're going to merge from the Hubs Cloud client, you don't want it to break every single time. And I think the easiest way, of course it depends on the customization you have. No, it's the Hubs one, is to define, for example, a component, an AFrame component. So demo, for example, and then in here I would include, so at the end of my import, is it in this one? Sorry. It's the end of the day in Belgium, so you'll have to, I apologize for it, but so I have an example there, so but I would do it, for example. I would do it here because I honestly every single time I forgot the syntax of custom component in AFrame. I would copy it. I'll do the register component. So I would copy it from an existing component, and in here, so I have some custom things that you don't need to care about. And in here, so here I would also have none of this, and I would just say, for example, a console log as a test. So, Meetup. And here I would run it locally. The hub would load the AFrame component that would load my JS code, and then it would display on every client connected. I would do my run deploy, and then normally in my Hubs Cloud instance, I would see this new console.log for every person connected. Of course, instead of using just console log, all the little tricks or things I would have done in the console there, so for example, comparing the distance between two persons, that's where I would put it. So I would go back there. And here I would do all those little customization with, like I said earlier, the warning that instead of here running just for me, it's going to run for every single person connected or connecting. So you would have to make sure the timing is okay and that it makes sense to run for everyone, or otherwise limit to some persons. But yeah, that's the quick and easy path, and I think the most maintainable way to bring your customization to the Hubs cloud client. And that's it. Well, yeah,
Fabian,
I
that
was
was
going to
great.
say,
Thank you so much.
don't worry, Vince, it's finished. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming. Thanks a lot, Matt, for organizing. I think that's one of the things I like the most about Hubs. It's not just the code base and all the cool stuff we can do with it, but there is like following the WebXR community and mindset, this desire to build together and share. So I think that's one of the nicest part in addition to just working. So yeah, I'm super glad that you invited me and that this kind of event take place. And yeah, for anybody, I'll have to go, but don't hesitate to send me a tweet, chat on Discord, ask any question. I know that was either a bit easy for those who already customized Hubs, or a bit fast for those who are discovering it still. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask. If I can answer, I'll be happy to.
Great. Thanks again, Fabien. And next time we're going to have Anthony present the Austin WordCamp. So some of the behind the scenes there. So I hope to see all of you there as well.
Definitely. Merci à tout le monde. Have a nice day. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.